Hi, everyone. Welcome to the last Auvik Roadmap update of 2019. I'm Sarah Cunningham-Scarf, Auvik's Field Marketing Specialist. Before I hand it over to our VP of Product Management, Patrick Albert, I'm just going to run through a few housekeeping things so everyone has an awesome experience during his talk. Please post in the Q&A throughout. Patrick will be answering questions at the end of the session, and we want this to be as interactive as possible, so please throw out those questions and we'll do our best to answer them. Lastly, the webinar will be recorded and posted on auvik.com/franklymsp as soon as possible, usually within a day or two, in case you want to circle back or share anything that Pat talks about today. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce your host. Patrick Albert is our Vice President of Product Management. He's been with Auvik for 2 years now, and he's been working in the MSP industry since 2005. All right, now that that's out of the way, Pat, over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Sarah. So today we're gonna talk through a couple of different things. We're gonna be doing a bit of a roll-up of what we've done over the last couple of months, and also start talking about where we're going and what we're working on. And just before we get into that, so if anyone on the webinar is not familiar with Auvik, let me just give you a quick overview. So Auvik is a network management platform specifically for MSPs. We're very much focused on the channel and all of you. We're headquartered in Waterloo, Canada, which is just outside of Toronto. A couple of offices around the world now in UK, Spain, Australia, and we've seen lots and lots of growth. We're a little over 200 employees now. Just before I jump into some of the content, I just want to do just a quick mention. So we're actually working on our first conference, which is coming up in January. It's based off of our Frankly MSP Live podcast, which has seen really good results. And if anyone's a big fan that's in the audience right now, feel free to jump in on the comments. But we've seen a lot of great positive feedback on the MSP Live podcast. So we've actually been working on turning it into a conference that is really designed for growth-minded MSPs, owners, leaders, executives, managers, otherwise. And the event is going to be very much focused on just giving you insights from a diverse set of speakers on kind of what's happening in managed services today. So it's very much focused on the industry. And after a couple of days of working with some of the brightest minds in the space, we really hope that you'll be able to walk away with some fresh perspectives, a much more powerful professional network and some good strategies. So feel free to check out franklymsplive.com for the event and registration details. We've got a promo code up on the screen here, live100, to get $100 off. We're also capping the attendance at around 150 people. We really want to make this an amazing experience. So we definitely want to make sure to check out your spot if you're able to make it. So as I mentioned, I want to start off the webinar just again doing a roll up of what we've done in the last 6 months or so. I know everyone's really busy. The release notes are definitely easy to miss all the time. So I want to spend a little bit of time focusing on a bit of a roll up. And also just going into some of the how you can use some of these features ultimately to help your business and solve some real world problems. Just before we get into some of that, I wanted to actually talk through some really interesting stats. We've had a very busy last 6 months or so. And one of the last things I talked to everyone about was the launch of some new APIs. So giving you access into some of the data that we've collected with authentication, of course. So since launching our APIs, we've actually had 7 integrations, which has been phenomenal. We're actually averaging around 9.2 million API calls a month, which is showing a lot of great interest there. And one thing that makes me really happy personally is we're averaging around 300,000 configuration backups a month on behalf of all of the MSPs. That is a great stat for me because it really shows how powerful this is and making sure that we're helping you keep all of your clients in a safe, reliable manner, just making sure that you have a backup in case you ever did need it. And 300,000 is a really great milestone for us. And last but not least, if you haven't heard, we also released our 2019 edition of our data report. This is free. Sarah will go ahead and post a link to the chat in the chat here. We did one last year in 2018, and we just did an update on it about a month ago. And what this report is it talks about using all the data and all the insights we have in just giving you some perspective as to what the vendor diversity looks like in the MSP market. So looking at it from the lens of, what are some of the big trends that we're seeing in really big MSPs, what are we're seeing in small and medium MSPs, and also from an SMB perspective, what are the trends that we're seeing there? So what are the big vendors that we're seeing? Which ones are gaining market share, which ones are losing, which are some of the up and coming ones. So strongly suggest checking it out. It's an awesome report. And we also try to add a bit of our own commentary based off some of the industry insights we have. Lots of really neat stuff. Feel free to just take a quick look at it, a quick glance. If anything, just gives you a bit of insight into what we're seeing throughout the industry. All right. So one of the first things we did in the last 6 months was launch Hyper-V mapping. We've had capability with VMware for a couple of years now of understanding what that infrastructure looks like, what hosts are there, and what guests are there. And recently, we've extended this out into the Microsoft Hyper-V world. Hyper-V is very, very widely adopted in the MSP space, so we know how important this is. And doing an integration with Hyper-V here allows us to really understand what that network looks like, what hosts are there, what virtual machines are there, just so we can provide really, really awesome documentation around your client's network and in an automated fashion. Now, continuing on that front, we constantly have a huge investment in device support, and this is a big focus of ours, and pretty much always will be, as MSPs are branching into new clients and new vendors are being introduced and new makes and models come out there. We want to make sure that we're trying to stay on top of all the big trends. So we've added quite a bit of device support in the last 6 months. Some big names here, Palo Alto. We've done quite a bit more with SonicWall. We launched an awesome integration with Datto's networking and the networking gear. So added some support for Arrow, Hive networks, and also some more devices under the Ubiquity umbrella. Again, this is a continuing investment on our side, so we'll continue to give an update on this as we progress through this. And if we have any Canadians in the crowd, earlier this year we launched quite a few new data centers in Europe and in Australia, and we just launched a new Canadian data center. For those of you that have any data residency requirements in the good old north. And on that note, we just got a lot of snow last night, our first big snowfall of the year. So definitely feeling very Canadian right now. And last time, I gave a bit of insight into some of the APIs that we were launching. And that gives you visibility into inventory information, that gives you visibility into some of the alerts that we've generated. But the technology part is only half of the kind of the story that you really need to put together if you really want to have a strong ecosystem. And Auvik, we definitely have a strong belief in the better the ecosystem, the better the integrations, the more profitable and more efficient that you can be. So in addition to launching the API and the technology side of things, we've also launched a more formal technology partner program, just making sure that the vendors that are building integrations with us have done so in a way that they've received training from us, they understand some of the content, they have access to the product, they have great access to the right escalation points on our side, and also given our sales team a bit of a heads up as to what that integration looks like and what it solves, and just trying to make sure that this is a really, really good joint beneficial program, and because largely the goal is to make sure that everyone here benefits from it, and the better we can work with some of these vendors, the better we can support them, obviously the better the solution in the end. So we've launched, in addition to launching some APIs, we've also launched a technology partner program, and quite a few of these vendors have gone down that route. And last webinar, roadmap webinar, I talked a lot about Auvik Traffic Insights. That was a really, really big push from our perspective, trying to give MSPs largely unprecedented access into net flow information, which really means giving you insight into how your end customers' networks are being utilized. And that goes into helping you understand capacity planning and understanding and helping you diagnose issues and bottlenecks a lot quicker. So I won't go into a lot of detail on that module today, but I did want to talk about some of the enhancements and some of the work that we've been doing on it to make that an even better experience. So first and foremost, when we launched, we didn't have the capability to process S-flow data. S-flow is another form or another variant of NetFlow. A lot of different devices out there use it. So it's definitely something we rushed to be able to add support or done as quickly as possible. Just make sure we can support more broad, diverse environments. And we've also worked a lot on our application detection, and we'll talk a little bit more about this on the roadmap front as well. But now that we're gathering a lot of really, really detailed, great information, we're working on training and updating our algorithms to do an even better and better and better job at being able to understand what type of traffic this is. So I'll talk a bit more of that, some of the next steps that we want to do, but there's definitely been some big improvements lately. And we've also given you the ability to add your own custom definitions. So if we have either made a misclassification based off some of evidence that we thought was pointing us in a direction, or if it's traffic that we just don't understand because we've never seen it before, we've given you the ability to add your own custom application support in here. So you can say this type of traffic is actually this type of application, which will ultimately help us in the long run as well, make this as much as automated as possible. And another big improvement we've done lately on the Auvik Traffic Insights module is taking a lot of more device information from our discovery and utilizing that to provide you a much more rich experience when you're looking at conversations or any of the views in Traffic Insights. And what that first of all means is if we're able to discover a name of a device throughout a discovery, which is very, very common, you actually see that name in Traffic Insights as opposed to just the internal address. So at a glance, you can quickly and easily see what device that is, as opposed to kind of figuring out this IP address is this. And that's kind of where the powerful aspect of these two applications coming together is starting to provide a lot of benefit. And the other thing that we've done on the summary views and some of the conversation views is trying to do automated lookups of the external addresses to see if we can take a better guess at what it is and kind of whether it's a domain or whether that is a subdomain, and trying to give you a bit more visibility. And so at a glance, you can understand that, okay, this type of traffic is going to this external mail server, and it's Google's mail server as an example. So just trying to give you more at a glance views and trying to automate more of these lookups just to make this a much more powerful and rich experience for your technicians. And something we just released, I believe, about 2 weeks ago, is the Cisco hardware lifecycle section in our user interfaces. It's at the top left-hand side. So I want to make sure that it's front and center, because what this information does is give you visibility into the end-of-life milestones of a particular device. So Cisco's done a really good job at actually identifying these different milestones, publicizing that information, and making it available to vendors. So that's the first vendor we're working with here. And a lot of vendors follow a very similar approach. So on the Cisco front, there's quite a few different milestones. There's end of sale. There is device warranty and device coverage statuses. There is kind of a date of when's the last time Cisco will actually patch a device, so provide software maintenance. And also there's another milestone specifically more oriented around security, which is typically a little bit after when they stop patching a device. So when will they actually stop patching security issues on a device? And a couple other milestones related to contract renewals and then support. So when's the last time they'll actually answer the phone, basically. So we brought a lot of this information into a couple of new dashboards. The first is the device lifecycle status dashboard, which you can see on the left, which talks about some of these end-of-life milestones. And so the powerful aspect here really comes into being able to set expectations and do some planning. Fairly recently, I did a webinar with Brad from Cisco, actually, on this exact topic. And he actually used a bit of a personal example that really, really resonated well with me, where he was mentioning you moved into a house and the water heater had failed and needed a replacement. The best thing that had happened during that experience was, as the technician that was coming to install the new one left, he slapped a sticker on it saying, this expected life of this new appliance is about X years. I think it was 10 years. Now, what that does, around setting expectations is a really, really powerful thing. It avoids the frustration around planning for these events. The last thing that you ever want to go to a client is with and say, hey, you got to buy this new expensive device because your previous one failed. If it's a surprise, that is not a great experience, obviously, as well at all. But if you know it's coming, you can educate, you can plan, you can potentially prevent downtime. But it's also just less of a surprise, so you can actually budget for these types of things. And Brad's story really, really resonated well with me because I think it's a good personal example. But if you can take this information and go back to your clients and work through kind of hardware refresh cycles, and now the conversation is also more fact-based. It's less about, hey, this switch is really, really old. We should really replace it soon. It's more of a conversation about, this switch is 5 years or 5 or 10 years old. Cisco stopped selling it, so if we do need to get a replacement, I'm probably going to have to go to eBay to get another one if I don't have one. Cisco doesn't sell it anymore. But more importantly, they've actually stopped fixing security issues on this, which means that if there's any vulnerabilities that are identified, which is likely, there will be no fixes. So this is a huge hole in our security program. So it starts turning the conversation far less about opinions and such, and moves it far more towards a fact-based conversation. So our goal here is really to give you as much information as possible in an automated fashion, so that you can start having these conversations and you can have some of the data behind it that doesn't take you a long time to go ahead and gather. So we've introduced a couple of new dashboards here, the left and the right. The right one talks more about the contract status. So, do you have a valid warranty? Do you have a valid service coverage? If you don't have service coverage right now, when is the last day that you can actually buy new service coverage? And if you do have coverage, when's the last day you can renew this coverage? So again, trying to help you with the two different aspects, the hardware itself and the support contracts associated with it, trying to automate as much of this as possible, and give you those insights. So we're starting this with Cisco. As I mentioned, they've done a phenomenal job at taking all this information and exposing it via ways that we can easily pull it. But we're working with quite a few other vendors to see if we can also get this data. So definitely looking forward to expanding this past Cisco, but it was a great first milestone from our perspective. So this is a really, really interesting problem to help you solve. This just makes that relationship easier and smoother, especially when it comes to QBRs or planning. All right, so as mentioned, lots of stuff going on in the last 6 months or so. So what I want to talk about now is, what are we working on? Where are we going? And what I'll be talking about through today is definitely a large amount of the stuff that we're working on, but I definitely want to more focus on some of the things that are coming in the short or medium term. So I'll highlight some of these different things, but do know we have a couple of longer term projects that we'll definitely give you more information on as we get closer. So the first is around some PSA improvements. Actually, it turns out we were a little early on one of these, and we actually launched it last weekend, which is awesome. It was ahead of schedule. But we want to make sure that we're continuing to invest in the ecosystem, as I mentioned earlier, and a big part of that is around PSA integrations. So at ConnectWise Manage, we are working on, we have actually just launched site and sub-site support. So that is actually live in the wild right now. And we're working on launching very soon the ability to specify type, subtype, and item when we are actually creating tickets. And same with Autotask, giving the ability to specify issue types and sub-issues. And the goal around some of these enhancements is really around trying to provide the PSA with more context of what the issue is, whether it is a wider spread issue or is a smaller one. How urgent is it? And the goal is, as I mentioned, just really to give more context to the PSA, so you can use some of this information in either routing it, so make sure you get to the right person at the right time, and also automating some of this information so that you can actually run some trending on the PSA side to see if there's a lot of different types of tickets that are coming in on this device or in this type of issue. So trying to give you as much context as possible. So these are some of the things that we're working on with those two vendors, and we'll continue to work through quite a few other enhancements on this front as well. And last but not least, on the PSA side, we are working on an integration with ServiceNow. And those of you that are not familiar with ServiceNow, it's another vendor in the space that we typically see in very, very large enterprises, or now starting to see more and more in very, very large MSPs. It's a very, very powerful, powerful application. It gives you a lot of control into the workflows and all the different aspects. So again, we're seeing a lot of the larger MSPs taking a look at it. So we're starting an integration from a ticket perspective, just so we can start pushing tickets into it. So those of you that have looked or are going to look at ServiceNow, do know that we're going to start building integration with that as well. On traffic insights, we're working on quite a few enhancements. The first is just adding several new data centers, several new or additional data centers around the world. And as I mentioned earlier, the application detection system is something we're going to continue to invest in pretty significantly. We've got a pretty big update that we're working on that should bring it to kind of a next gen detection system. But the goal of it is really to be able to analyze that traffic faster and provide better grouping and more accurate grouping of some of the information that's displayed. So all this, the goal here is just to give you more visibility, and as you can kind of see on the right hand side, we're just trying to group these into really, really tangible outcomes for you to understand. Whether this is YouTube, you don't necessarily care what server of YouTube it's going to, but you do definitely care that it is YouTube traffic. So we're working on quite a big update on that front, and also working soon on working on an API giving you access to some of the data from this app module as well. A bunch of other just kind of general enhancements that we're working on. First, on the alerting front, every time we do an upgrade with some of the Auvik collectors out there, we see a couple of different scenarios where the collector isn't able to come online afterwards for some particular reason. It's very rare, but there are a lot of system-related issues or end device-related issues that sometimes prevent it. Things like the disk is completely full and we can't actually, we can't actually start an upgrade. So we're trying to introduce some new alerts that give you a bit more visibility into things that could potentially cause either the upgrade to not start or not finish. But largely with the goal to make sure that those very rare situations you've gotten as much of a heads up on that there's potential issues that could cause those types of things. And another big update that we want to do to maintenance windows around just giving you more visibility into issues that have occurred during maintenance windows. Last update around 6 months ago, I believe it was, we introduced some views into the product that said, hey, if an alert actually came up during a maintenance window, the goal of it is to not generate alerts. But there are some things that may still be issues after the fact that may be unrelated to the maintenance window. So in the last 6 months or so, we gave you the ability to see those in the interface, and now we're working on the ability to actually send an actual alert after the maintenance window has elapsed, if the issue is still if the issue is still detected and still a problem. Again, the goal of maintenance windows is if there's a known outage, either you're doing an upgrade or otherwise, and you don't want to get notifications during that period, but there might not necessarily be a correlation between another issue that happens during that window. So just trying to give you more visibility into that. And I mentioned this last time. I think we're working on a statistics API as well. This is a much larger API than some of the other ones that we've launched. So it's definitely a much larger project from our perspective. But the goal is really being able to deepen the data that's available to BI tools and dashboarding solutions into the metrics that we actually capture themselves. You can pull a lot of great useful information right now, but we want to extend the ability into the actual metrics that we capture. So that's something that we're working on as well. And we're getting much closer to the completion of our single sign-on project. So giving you the ability to tie Auvik apps into SAML 2.0. So if you do have if you have an identity provider and you'd like to do an SSO type integration, that's something we are working on. We're continuing to work on as well. And last, on kind of the more miscellaneous topics, we've encountered quite a few environments as of late that have the need for an on-premise proxy. Typically, we're still seeing this in larger schools and that type of thing. So we're also extending the collector to add some basic proxy support, just for those really ultra secure environments. All right. So on to some of the bigger things. Last time I mentioned that we were starting on a project that was going to take us a fairly long time because it's a very large architectural change, but going into MSP level inventory views. We are still working on it, but we're getting very, very close to the finish line at this point, and getting very excited about all these views. It's something that comes up very often, and the use cases and the ability to use these views are very almost endless. So we see a lot of partners asking us to be able to see all devices across all of your networks, all of your customers, largely so you can go in, you can search, you can sort, you can filter it, you yourself can determine the most commonly deployed switches or firewalls or access points, which ties really good into that hardware refresh cycle I was mentioning earlier, and being able to look at all the devices across all the networks. It gives you a bit more of a view in terms of being able to help you hunt down which devices are out there, and potentially looking at things like more vulnerable devices than others, based off either software firmware version or otherwise. This is something we want to be able to help you a lot more with, is giving you a more global view into all these different devices, so that if a vendor releases a new patch, you can quickly and easily take a look at all the devices, or you can export it into a spreadsheet and see all the devices that are running a particular software version, just to help you plan your patching more appropriately and more efficiently. And with that, also going into MSP alert views as well. As a service desk manager, just monitoring all of your critical alerts across all of your customers is obviously a very, very high priority. All this information is available in the PSA, but we would love to bring this information into our product, and gives you just the aggregate view of all of your clients. We fairly often get the question around, what's the best screen to show all of my clients, or to show on a dashboard or show on a TV. So we're definitely trying to optimize some of our views around trying to give you access to that. So in addition to the worldwide view at the top, giving you visibility into kind of trends around the bottom, around time periods and when alerts are coming in, and those alerts themselves. So that's one big thing that we're working on. And while we're doing that, we're also working on a bit of a style refresh as well of a couple of these different views. Just trying to give you, again, more control, more flexibility into being able to take this data and search it easier using column level filters, and just more control and highlighting the really critical information to you. So it's easier at a glance views into some of this information. All right. And the last big thing that I want to talk about, the thing that I'm very, very, very excited about, it's something we've been hearing a lot about in the industry, where there's not a lot of tools or not a lot of capabilities in the industry to take some of this information and consolidate it, is logging, or particularly syslog. If you're not familiar with syslog, it's a very, very common message logging standard that a lot of the different network providers use. And it is really, really useful from a couple of different perspectives. And I definitely want to highlight that a little bit before I get into kind of what we're working on there. But syslog, as I mentioned, is a logging standard. So it gives us the ability to actually tap in and take a look at and use some of the logs from network devices. So when people hear syslog, traditionally a lot of people kind of jump to, this is a great monitoring solution. And it absolutely is. It gives you really good visibility into network issues and gives you the ability to have more proactive notifications about incidents that are mentioned inside of logs. So things like failed SSH attempts, there isn't a number or a state that we can query these network devices and ask that. We can't ask and say, hey, is someone trying to hack in? Hey, is someone trying to hack in? But that does appear in logs, and things like VPN issues and otherwise, they show up in log messages, and that's a really, really key monitoring capability, is being able to look at those logs and look for things that could be potential incidents. But the other perspective that is also important to highlight is the troubleshooting side. So syslog, because it is a log of pretty much everything the device is doing, it gives you great visibility into what happened before, during, and after issues occurred. So it kind of puts you in the scene so you can see what's going on and what actually happened historically. So not only did you see that, not only did Auvik let you know that an issue occurred, you can jump in and actually see what happened and what led up to that incident. So with that, let me dive into some of the things that we're working on this front. And the first phase is going to be focused particularly around that troubleshooting aspect. So the first thing we have to do is understand what types of log messages that you really care about. Now, the blessing and the curse with syslog and logs in general is a lot of these devices can be incredibly chatty. They can have thousands of logs per second on busy devices, and a lot of that information isn't necessarily going to be useful. So we want to give you as much flexibility and as much control over the types of messages that you do actually care about. In a lot of cases, you'll want fairly high. You want your critical. You want your very important messages. But in some situations, you'll want other types of messages as well. So we want to give you control over what types of messages you want to be able to pull in. So giving you those different things, and also giving you the ability at a device type level as well, what type of logging. Again, we've tried to categorize them into some of the standards around critical, warning, informational, debug, etc. So this is where it starts getting into the really exciting part for me, is getting into the views themselves. So as you can see, kind of the view at the bottom here is based off of some of our newer design looks, and giving you the really, really powerful searching and filtering through in-column header filters, but also a granular search box as well. And our goal here is really to make syslog not looking for a needle in a haystack. So there's a lot of messages, again, so we're trying to filter out the more critical and the more relevant ones. But once we do get to a view, giving you all the powerful filtering, searching capabilities that you would expect from a logging platform, and also the ability to save very common searches. So if you've done some diagnostics, you've done some troubleshooting, and you've come to a fairly common situation where you're seeing the same type of log message before an incident, you can definitely go ahead and save that filter, or save that search rather, so you can reuse it in the future. I think this is going to be a really very, very powerful thing, and our goal is eventually to take a look at how MSPs are using this, so we can ultimately provide a better out-of-the-box experience and try to give you more visibility into some of the common issues. And kind of the next step, continuing down the troubleshooting realm, is the ability to identify some of the top devices, the top critical messages, and the top common issues across your client base. So this is where taking some of the data you saw previously on the previous slide, and starting to aggregate this in a really meaningful way. And one thing I just didn't mention on the previous screen is you can take a look at syslog messages from a device itself, or from all the different devices on a client's network, because sometimes there's cascading effects that occur between some devices, and being able to see all the logs in one pane of glass is very, very useful from a troubleshooting perspective. But the volume can get very, very, very complex at that point. So what we want to do is also introduce some really good aggregation views that give you visibility into what are the top devices, what are the top messages, and what are the top issues that we're seeing. So as you can see on the bottom here, you can see over time trending period of how many critical issues are occurring over time. And I think from my perspective, one of the really interesting parts about this is, again, using all of this information is great from the perspective of understanding what happened before and during an incident. But if we can eventually pair that back with the traditional monitoring data that is either SNMP based or otherwise more stateful monitoring data, I think it'll be a really great transformation of actually being able to get you to the point where we can recommend, here's a general area of logs you want to take a look at based off of other incidents that we've discovered. So lots of really exciting interfaces and aggregation views that we want to work on there. And again, the goal here really is to make it not too overwhelming, not too much in one pane, not too much in one particular view. So to get you to the point where you can go in, diagnose, you know approximately when an issue occurred, and you can start seeing quickly what are some of the critical messages that occurred during that time period across all the different devices in your network. And lastly, on the syslog front, and actually one of the last things before we wrap up here, is out-of-box alerts. Now, syslog is very much like Windows Event Log or any other logging sources like that out there, where there's a lot of logs, a lot of different types of messages, and all vendors follow very, very, very different standards. So if you compare this to in the Windows world where you have Windows Event Log, Windows has a fairly standard list of event IDs and all the information that comes with it. But the application support is very complex to handle. So translating that into the network world, there are tons and tons of vendors out there, and they all interface and they all log messages very, very differently. So what our goal here is to, very, very similar to what we do with device support, is provide really awesome out-of-the-box alerts for some of the most typical MSP use cases or experiences. And again, looking at that from the device perspective as well. So trying to provide an out-of-box experience that summarizes and looks at the various different types of devices. So largely, you don't have to know all of the specific message types, what it looks like, what it feels like, and we try to do a lot of that out of the box. So things like, we want to be able to give you the ability to send you all warning messages related to the main firewall, or let me know when there's a failed SSH attempt, or send me all critical messages from the firewall that mention VPN down. Again, with syslog, the sky's the limit in terms of the types of things you can look at and alert on. The big challenge that a lot of MSPs face that we're looking to solve here is trying to pair that back to what is really important. What are the really critical things that MSPs really should care about? So rather than sifting through all these messages and guessing, we want to make sure we provide as much of a solid out-of-box experience, and that we'll continue to expand on over time as we see different requests from various MSPs and learn more about different devices out there and how they interact with syslog. Now, last but not least, we obviously don't want to limit you at kind of where our imagination ends in terms of what types of alerts are important. So giving you also the ability to create your own alerts as well. So that's very important to us as well as you take kind of what we've given you and expand out from there. So just before I wrap up on these topics, just in terms of timing, I know it's one of the most common questions we'll probably get here, is particularly around syslog. We've been working on it for quite a while. We do have quite a bit of work left. So we're definitely hoping to have this in beta in the first half of the next year. The sooner the better, obviously. But we'll have various different milestones throughout the beta. So we'll probably actually have a couple of different beta milestones that align to the troubleshooting and monitoring different use cases or different situations like I was mentioning. So we'll probably have a couple of different betas throughout the first half of the year. But that is definitely our intent, and that's what we'd love to be able to launch for you. So we'll give you more information as this continues. Again, our goal here is to make sure that it is an awesome out-of-the-box experience, but also the quality that you need from an MSP's perspective. So we don't want to launch it ahead of time if it's not ready, which is why we don't want to commit to specific dates yet. But we'll definitely do our best to get there as soon as possible. But making sure quality is very, very important. And making sure that we deliver the best experience to you. So it'll definitely give you more insight and more visibility as things do get closer. And if you are interested in participating in the beta, I strongly suggest reaching out to your partner success manager, and they can add you onto our beta list, and we'll go from there. So just before I wrap up, just another quick mention for those of you that may have didn't see it at the very beginning, just a quick reminder. We are doing our Frankly MSP live conference, and there is a $100 off promotion at the bottom of the screen here.